Have you ever, as a performance coach, have you ever had a situation with a client where the things that worked for you, the books that you read that pulled you up and helped you to man up, did not register for your students, or did you ever have a situation like that?
Yeah, there are several, but the main one is A New Earth and the Power of Now, and another book called The Subtle Art of Not Giving a F by Mark Manson. The
Yeah,
Power of Now is by Eckhart Tolle.
yeah.
If someone hasn't suffered enough, those books mean nothing to them. Just imagine like an NBA or an NFL team that just barely makes the playoffs every year, so they don't pick high enough in the draft to get better players, but they're not low enough in the draft to where they're going to tank. They haven't suffered enough, right? It's the same thing. Like for me, when I hit rock bottom, which is my father being killed by a drunk driver, my girlfriend breaking up
Hmm.
with me being sent to the
Yeah,
Middle East, there was a lot of things that went wrong in 2006 for me.
yeah.
Um, Watching the Dallas Mavericks lose to the Miami Heat in the finals, like there was a lot of things that like were traumatic that year.
Yeah,
When that happens, for me, I had suffered enough. My body just sort of gave out. There's this thing called your body continues to produce cortisol. If you've gone through like severe depression, there's this thing where your body cannot produce any more cortisol, and you just have this like moment of reprieve where you just feel fantastic for a little while. My body had
yeah.
gotten to that point, adrenaline fatigue, like I just couldn't produce any more cortisol. And then from that point, once I finally read The Power of Now, I had suffered enough to where just the concept of like me being in the present moment and not suffering, and like the realization that I am going to die and that I'm not that special. When I came
Mm.
to that, it was just such a magnificent relief. I still remember to this day. I'm driving southbound on I can't remember, it's I-85 from Atlanta to Warner Robins, Georgia. And I just pulled over to the side of the road because it was just such an incredible relief for me,
Mm.
this realization that
Mm.
I'm enough, like this realization that like I'm going to die, and when I do, it's not that big of a deal. Like it's
Mm.
not going to matter that many people, and it was so liberating to just
Mm.
not worry about what other people thought. Now,
Mm.
so what I just said to a lot of people who are like very like they've suffered but not too much. They've grown up in kind of a middle class existence, had their heart broken a couple times or whatever. To those
Mm.
people, everything I said is going to sound like hogwash mumbo jumbo. But when you've
Yeah,
actually hit rock bottom,
yeah.
and my rock bottom is not like heroin living on the street rock bottom. Like, there's certain
No,
people
no,
who've
no.
gone way further than me. But when you've gotten to your bottom where you've suffered enough, then at
Yeah,
that point, then all of a sudden these books about enlightenment, present moment awareness, and gratitude, they start making a ton of fucking sense to you. That if you
yeah.
haven't suffered enough, you're just not going to experience it. And I have some
Trauma
friends of mine.
with.
Yeah, I have some friends of mine that are probably worth maybe 50, $100 million. And so
Mhm.
what happens is with money, money can always placate their suffering to the point where they never suffer enough. I have a couple friends of mine, like they have, private jets or whatever. And it's like their heart is broken by a girl, but because there's always 10 more girls, or they have
Mm.
a bad business deal, but they're so wealthy that it's like they can always cover up the pain. So they never suffer enough. So they never get to a point where they look for enlightenment.
Yeah, it's funny because like trauma always wakes you up because I think there was a point I got in a fight with my dad. I got kicked out of the house and I had to figure it out. I had to like figure it out. And then like the second time was when my dad got sick and then like I was in the hospital with him and I'm like, shit, no one is gonna save me. Like like the hospital bills were coming in and I was like, no one's coming to save me. I have to figure this shit out. And I feel like when you have a moment like that, it's like, okay, I have to fucking figure this out. No one's coming to save me. No one's coming to save this family. I have to figure it out. And I feel when you have that moment, yeah, you value everything so much more and you just realize how unimportant a lot of things are. Like how people's perception of you, what people think of you, you just start to be like, okay, it really doesn't matter.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
made some poor financial investments earlier this decade, and when I watched the market crash and my portfolio crash, and realizing my father, who was a financial guru, he wasn't there to save me, and I had to fix all these problems myself. That was another realization for me, like the level of pressure that I was under. Losing that much, like just imagine, guys, losing 50% of your net worth in a day. Like it was like that
Mm,
kind of feeling, right?
mm,
And then, by the way, that sucks when you're worth 50 grand. If you're worth several million and you lose 50, I'm not saying how much I was worth, but if you lose several
yeah.
million in a day, you're going to be like, this is like, it's one of these things where uh, I didn't want to end my own life, but I totally understood why some guys back in New
Yeah.
York were doing it. Like I understood the impulse was just so incredibly strong, and you would do anything to get rid of that impulse and that panic. So that's why that happened. But then what I do is just sit down, I have gratitude, talk to my family, and they were like, we love you. It doesn't matter. Like, it's fine. Whatever happened. And, I start a scalable business that works out, make all the money back. And I look back on it and I'm grateful for the whole situation to happen. But it's one of these things where now I look back because I had gratitude in the situation and now I know I can get through anything. Going through growing up, going to Woodrow Wilson High School in East Dallas, with all the fucking crime that was there, going through U.S. military survival school, and then surviving like these several economic calamities, including the one in '08 and the one in 2010 and the one in 2020 and the one in when the invasion of Ukraine, I guess 2021, all of those economic calamities that had happened. When you survive through those, you just realize you can get through anything. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost like, and the other thing you're going to find is that like as you get older, the memento mori, you remember you're mortal, and then the other one is this too shall pass, right? These sayings that people have.
This too shall pass. I love that one.
This too shall pass. It's just really important. Coming to the realization, and then the other one I love is Good by what's his name? Jocko Willink. He's like, you just won $10 million. Good. Hey man, just want to let you know, like half your staff just quit last night. Good. Like no matter what it is, the answer is good. It's like either the thing that happened is good or the challenge that's on the way is also good. It's such a healthy way of like living your life. To me, that's better than therapy. A friend of mine was asking me, am I happy? Because he was looking at all the things I was doing. And he asked a legitimate question. He's like, hey man, are you happy? And I was like, man, I've never been happier. I just can't imagine, like I get to accomplish goals with other men that I respect. That's the apex of human existence. That and having a family, I think, is the apex of human existence. So why not build a life where you can do that all the time? So that's the reason. I mean, back to your original point, it's like, I don't have an issue with therapy. If you could find a performance coach for me who was a therapist, I would go to him in 2 seconds, but he has to understand that bills must get paid no matter how I fucking feel about it. As long as he understands that, then I'm down for whatever.
Okay. In terms of with performance coaching with your clients, have you ever had, how much has finances affected the emotional well-being of like the clients you've had?
It just to some extent a lot. And that's one of the things we focus on. It's like, so just think of like health, wealth, and relationships as like different sliders, different attributes, whichever the one that they're having the worst problem with. Like I have one client, he's doing well. He's got a CDL, pretty good license. He's a pretty good job driving trucks. And his wealth is good. His relationships aren't, but he's overweight. And so health becomes one. If all three are even, health comes first. If all three are even, health comes first. Okay. Yeah. But then I have what the majority of my clients are in this situation where they're in pretty decent shape. Maybe they've gone through a breakup or they've just been working, really hard for a decade. And now they have some money saved up. So wealth is good. And health is good. So we spend our time working on relationships. We spend our time working on networking and becoming the most attractive versions of ourselves so that we can attract the opposite sex. That becomes the priority then for those men because their attribute on relationships is lower than health and wealth. But health has to come first, and just health. And it was like, I'd always known that, but it was actually Justin Waller who kind of just like made me clearly see that was the case. Like health is just, because one of the things people don't understand, and again, I've seen therapists that don't grasp this. You're talking to someone across from you on a couch who's morbidly overweight, and they're sitting there talking to you about depression. And the only thing you need to tell them is to lose weight. Like that has to be the priority. And when people don't grasp that, there's a great book by Dr. Daniel Perlmutter called Grain Brain, and it goes over plaque that's developed in the brain from eating too much gluten. People, when you get fat, I don't know if you've seen this before, Stephen, seen someone put on 100 pounds of fat and they turn crazy. There is no way to put on 50 pounds of fat and not have it affect your neurology. It absolutely does. And so when I hear, if you have a therapist and the therapist is looking at somebody who's over 14% body fat, let's say over 16% body fat, and that isn't the first thing your therapist is saying, because that's the difference between a therapist and a performance coach. The first thing I'm going to tell you is you've got to get the weight down. You've got to lower the body fat percentage, because it's not just your body, it's your brain that functions different when you do that. And so that's why, again, if you find a coach for me who's going to tell me that, then I'm all about it. If you find a coach for me, sorry, they numbed my face in my dentist's office. So I'm catching feeling here. My right side of my face.
I picked it up. Man.
It's completely numb. But if they're able to do that, then that's totally fine. But they have to understand I have to perform.